This is Laron, and today's discussion is going to be about ancient Egyptian origins. As many of us are familiar, ancient Egyptians are ancient Egyptian culture is arguably one of the most extensive and fascinating cultures from throughout human history. And it's just so much you can learn from ancient Egyptian culture, whether it be the hieroglyphics, the language, the pyramids, the culture of ancient Egyptians and customs, along with that, the history, even the physiognomy, which is the physical features of the ancient Egyptians. And today I'm going to be talking about pretty much all of the above in one aspect, and that's what's going to relate to the origins of ancient Egyptians. Before I get into that, I do want to inform you that ever since I was a child, about 12 or 13 years old, I've been interested in different cultures from across the world, mainly in human physical variation. It all started when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was bored at one point in time. It was a moment I was bored, and I went to the back room of my house I was residing in at the time. And so I was flipping through some encyclopedias, and I saw a picture of a girl from Java, Indonesia. I believe the dictionary is probably, or the encyclopedia is about 1960s or 1950s. It was an older encyclopedia. So I was flipping through the encyclopedia, and it said, girl from Java. She was holding on to her younger brother. She's about 10 years old. She was holding on to her younger brother while her mother was in the rice fields. And so I looked at her, and she looked a bit distinct. I had never seen anyone that looked like her before. She did not look like a Chinese woman. She did not look like an Indian woman from India, but she had physical features that may be common among both groups of people. And so ever since then, I was just so perplexed. I was thinking to myself, how could she look the way she looked, and she was not either one? And so and by the way, the girl she resembled, in my opinion, she resembled a younger version of actress Alfre Woodard, if you're familiar with her. Similar features like her face shape, her eyes. But the difference, she had straight hair, shoulder length hair. But she did look like a younger version of Alfre Woodard. But as I got older, I began to do my own independent research. I would read encyclopedias, National Geographic magazines, and just various sources. And then the older I got, once I became in my later on in my teens, towards my 20s, and even into my 20s, I started to not only read encyclopedias and National Geographic magazines, but also articles and genetics. I started studying genetics, and also movies and documentaries, books relating to anthropology and genetics. And it's like, it became a really, really interesting thing to me. It became a passion for me, actually. And I would study not only the Indonesians, but I would study pretty much every inhabited continent. Study Native Americans from North and South America, the history of North and South America, and the cultures, including South America and North America, including Central America as well, but also Europe, all throughout Africa, Asia, the Pacific, which is now called pretty much Oceania. So that includes Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, in Australia. So all the cultures, mainly the indigenous cultures from across the world. So I would study as many cultures as possible. I would study the physical features, the language, the history, every aspect relating to the culture. So, and by the way, I was hoping after high school that I would major in anthropology. I ended up not majoring in anthropology after high school, but business administration, because anthropology was not offered. And I got a bachelor's degree in business administration earlier this year, 3.7 cum laude. So I did get that, and thank God for that. Now I'm focusing on majoring in anthropology, because I can say I did take an anthropology class online a few years ago, and ended up getting A in this biological anthropology class. It was not easy, but I did pull out an A. And so now I plan on majoring in anthropology sometime next year and going as far as I can with anthropology. Now, okay, enough about that. We're focusing on the topic of ancient Egyptian origins and what my beliefs are in terms of their origins. Now, ancient Egyptians growing up, when I read the encyclopedias, they were categorized as Mediterranean Caucasians, and in the pictures they depicted as such Mediterranean Caucasians, meaning that they were Caucasian people with darker skin complexion. And in the artwork that was depicted, and even in movies, they were depicted as Caucasian people, like European people. They resemble European people, but with more tannish skin color, similar to Spaniards, but probably just a little bit darker. And so I didn't care when I was younger. I didn't care. I was just fascinated by ancient Egyptian culture, so I really didn't care where they were from and who they were related to. So I was just fascinated with the intelligence of this group of people and their accomplishments. And so, excuse me. So as I got a little bit older, especially in college, I began to hear individuals state that ancient Egyptians were black. And so I thought to myself, that's nonsense. There's no way in the world they can be black. Black people are just making it up. However, I started to hear more and more the frequency of that, especially on online sources. I started to hear that more and more. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I should do my own independent research. So I did my own independent research. And I came to the conclusion that ancient Egyptians, in my opinion, were black. And I'll explain to you why. There's several reasons why I think that ancient Egyptians were black. First and foremost, I'm going to start off with the Bible. The Bible, as anybody that's familiar with the Bible, the Quran, I believe, and then maybe the Torah, have very similar points in regards to the origin of man. And so as we know, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And anybody that has studied the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth realize that Shem is the father of the Semitic people. So the term Semitic is derived from Shem. He was the father of the Semitic people. The Semitic people are the Arabs, the Jewish people, and many people that are Middle Eastern people that are related to that. Also, then we have Japheth. Japheth is the father of the Caucasian people, mainly Europeans, people located in the Caucasus Mountains or in the surrounding regions like Armenians, Turkish people, and other people that are related not too far from that region. So those are descendants of Japheth. And then we have Ham. Also, just to go back here, Shem, many historians and pastors believe that Shem is also the father of East Asian people like Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, just different groups of people that are located in the East Asian and Southeast Asian region. Now going to Ham. Ham was the youngest son of Noah. Ham is said to be the father of black African people, such as let's say West Africans, Central Africans, South Africans, like Nigerians, Zulu people, just black African people. Now, then also East African people as well. Now, when when you read the Bible and it names the children of each of the Noah's sons and their descendants, when you get to Ham, Ham is noted to be the father of Cush. Cush is said to be modern-day Cush or Cushites or Cushitic people are said to be located in East Africa, mainly among the Somalian people. And as you can see, Somalian people are black people. And then also Mizraim. Mizraim is a descendant of Ham as well. And Mizraim in the Bible, they state Mizraim is Egypt. So they associate Mizraim with Egypt. And so that is one of the first pieces of evidence of why I believe ancient Egyptians were in fact black. Number two, we're going to focus on the linguistics. Now, there are many different language families throughout the world, many different language families, and I know in Africa, some countries alone, there are hundreds of different languages alone, and so with the languages spoken in the region of the Middle East and also East Africa, many of the languages spoken are Afro-Asiatic languages. Let's see, for instance, Jewish and Arabic, they're considered to be Afro-Asiatic languages. Let's see here, the languages spoken by the Berber people of Northern Africa are considered to be Afro-Asiatic languages. But there are many other languages as well, spoken Ethiopian, Somalian. However, Egyptian is considered to be an Afro-Asiatic language. There's many different branches, but the languages spoken by the Jewish people and the Arab people are more closely related to each other and their perspective branches, or branch, I should say. And now the languages spoken by ancient Egyptians are said to be of a distinct branch and more closely related to languages spoken in Eastern Africa by many linguists. And so that is another reason. And so for it to be closely related to languages spoken by other black people, like, again, Somalians and also Ethiopians, and then also the languages spoken by, let's see here, Eritrea, that is an indication that, again, ancient Egyptians are most likely black. So that's number two. Number three, we're going to focus on the artwork, the depictions of ancient Egyptians. Nearly all of ancient Egyptian artwork has been very specific on what these people look like. With ancient Egyptian artwork, majority of their artwork depicts them as being a copper-complected people, or with a copper complexion, I should say. These copper complexion is a darker brown, or a medium brown complexion. Also, you see other variations in skin complexion, such as a tannish skin complexion, or put it this way, more so a light brown skin complexion. Also, you see bluish black skin complexion, but you see a myriad of skin complexions, but mostly copper skin complexions. Now, with the variation of skin complexions, it's most similar to other parts of Africa, mainly East Africa. You see skin complexions like that. Even West Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa, you see a great amount of skin complexions. So that is another reason why I associate that in terms of physical features, or the depictions of ancient Egyptians, the variation of skin complexion. And still under number three in the category is you see a great amount of nose variations as well. You see some depictions in ancient Egyptians having a high aquiline nose, similar to that of Arabs. You see them with a broad, flat nose, similar to that to other black African peoples. And then, so you see the variation in noses. Now, moving on to the hair textures. Hair textures, and we're still in the category number three, which is the depictions of ancient Egyptians. Now, hair textures, ancient Egyptians displayed a wide variety of hair textures in regards to their artwork. Yes, I'm familiar with some of them cutting their hair and putting wigs on their head, but at the same time, not all of the depictions of ancient Egyptians even pointed that out. A lot of their depictions show them with their natural hair texture, and you see a wide variety of hair textures, including long, loose curls. You see ancient Egyptians with thick, woolly hair. You see ancient Egyptians with short, kinky hair, and it's so many variations. And hair variations, no one has as much hair variation as African descended people. Black Africans are African descended people, and that's another reason why it shows ancient Egyptians are were most likely of Black African origin. Another thing as well is limbs. Ancient Egyptians were depicted as having long, slim limbs in proportion to their body, arms and legs. Other groups of people, such as Indians, have long, slim limbs in proportion to their body. but more specifically, you see Africans, other black African people, having long, slim slim limbs in proportion to their body. And long, slim limbs in proportion to individuals' bodies is typically adapted. It was a feature that was adapted to hotter climates, and it actually evolved in hotter climates because long, slim limbs help dissipate heat better in a hotter climate, and while shorter, stocky limbs help retain heat in colder climates. So having long, slim limbs is better adapted towards hotter climates. And so that's another reason why I believe ancient Egyptians are more closely related to black Africans than other groups of people, and were in fact black Africans. Also here in the depictions as well, I think this is one of the most fascinating, probably if not the most fascinating, one of the most fascinating pieces that were pointed out in their artwork is their head shapes. Ancient Egyptians had very distinct head shapes. Majority of people throughout the world did not have head shapes similar to ancient Egyptians. Ancient Egyptians typically had elongated heads. They were dolichocephalic. Dolichocephalic means they were long-headed. So they had long heads, and the back portion of their head, which is their occipital, was prominent, and it extended backwards. It was long. Scientists stated that early ancient Egyptians had head shapes similar to Europeans, but the majority of Europeans do not display that type of characteristic. There are a lot of European people that have dolichocephalic heads, long headed, such as Italians, let's see, some Englishmen, French, Portuguese, just various different European people, but their dolichocephalic head was more so up and down, and they had more of a flatter occipital. Now, I have seen white people that have prominent occipitals, but not very many. However, I have to say, out of all groups of people, aside from ancient Egyptians, black Africans or African descended people typically display a high frequency of dolichocephalic heads with respects to the elongated occipital. I've seen many black families in America that have that feature. I'm talking about like parents having that head shape, and then their children having that head shape. And I can just go down the street, like in a black neighborhood, go down the street and see that individuals, children with that head shape and parents with that head shape is very common, and even in African peoples. I've seen many African peoples like Ghanaians, various different African people with that same head shape is very common among sub-Saharan African and black Africans in general. I've seen it very common in other East African people such as Ethiopians and Somalians, very similar. Excuse me. And overall, I have to say that ancient Egyptians, in terms of depictions, they do resemble East Africans very much so. Another thing as well is, I need to point out as well, is the depictions. Many ancient Egyptians were depicted of having, with their artwork having bigger teeth. Bigger teeth, I've seen the same type of teeth have been shown amongst East African peoples, especially Ethiopians and then Somalians. So overall, looking at the physiognomy, which is the physical features in the ancient Egyptians based off artwork, they look most similar to that of East Africans. Many of them are spitting images of East Africans. And so I have to say, and we're still in the category number 3, that overall there's proof. And then another thing I want to point out as well, as far as the depictions, their hairstyles. Many of their hairstyles are very similar, such as there's evidence showing that many ancient Egyptians may have possessed hairstyles such as different forms of dreadlocks, or twist with the bangs and then twist to their shoulders. And that is a hairstyle that is very common among East African groups, especially Ethiopians and Somalians. So that ends number 3. Now, as far as other forms of evidence that the ancient Egyptians were in fact black, is reports by individuals from other parts of the world, such as there were individuals that different, how should I say it? I want to say historians, but there were philosophers. There were Greek philosophers that visited the lands and stated that in terms of ancient Egyptians, there were different philosophers, and one particular philosopher stated that ancient Egyptians had woolly hair, and then also full lips. And as we know, full lips is a number one African feature, and ancient Egyptians, according to the philosopher, stated that many ancient Egyptians had those full lips as well. So that's another one. And then also here, there's philosophers from Greek that stated that ancient Egyptians were Ethiopians, categorized them as Ethiopians. And Ethiopians, as we know, was long ago was considered to be associated with black people. Also here, as far as the, let's see here. And that is that the descriptions as far as, that's number 4 actually, as far as reports. Also, I wanted to point out as well, another thing, just to go back to number 3, I should rewind and go back to number 3. As far as like the Sphinx, many people associate the Sphinx as evidence of what the many ancient Egyptians resembled in terms of the face structure. Some people state that they had the ancient Egyptian Sphinx. One of the Sphinx, I think it's one for Giza, I believe, was supposed to have like a European type of face structure. In my opinion, that Sphinx had a more of a Africoid face structure because it displayed what we call prognathism. If you look on the side here, you can see that the jaw projects up like this. And the jaw projects up. The jaw projecting up is a number one feature, or prognathism is a number one feature that's common among many African peoples or Africoid peoples, and so that's another way to show ancient Egyptians had like a black African or relationship, I should say. Also here, I want to point out the Seti, I believe Seti II. A famous ancient Egyptian pharaoh. In his tomb, he had a lot of different paintings, or like a collage of paintings inside his tomb. And so one of them is the depictions of ancient Egyptians in relationship to their neighbors. What I've realized is that a lot of the neighbors were, for instance, Arabs, Libyans, Nubians, and ancient Egyptians themselves. And nearly every aspect of their painting showed that they were first of all, the Libyans were fair skinned just like they are today. The Arabs were a tan skin complexion, or a yellowish or a tannish skin complexion, or olive skin complexion like they are today. And then the Nubians were a very dark skin complexion, more of a blue-black complexion, like many of them are today in Sudan. And then the ancient Egyptians were a reddish-brown skin complexion. So ancient Egyptians were aware that they were much darker than the Arabs and the Libyans as they are today, which is indicated that many of them are more similar to black Africans. And just to point this out as well, all Africans are not the complexion of Nubians. Africans can be dark in many areas of Africa, and then many of them are lighter than the depictions of ancient Egyptians themselves. So, I wanted to point that out as well. And as far as, and this is number 4. Well, I can say it's 3. Yeah, number 3. And I've already gone over number 4 as far as like the philosophers and their reports on the depiction of ancient Egyptians. Other than that here, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of ancient Egyptians. They really haven't been able to do a lot of genetic studies, but there are some genetic studies completed on ancient Egyptian mummies, such as Ramses. I want to say Ramses III. I believe it's Ramses III, they did a Y chromosome DNA testing and found out that his Y chromosome E. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's E1B1A, and that's a common West African Y chromosome. But then there's some studies that state that it actually could be E1B1B, which is more common among East African men and women, and so, or men, I should say. So it's quite possible that that many ancient Egyptian men possess the same Y chromosomes as East African men is not surprising because they look very similar to that. So, just in a nutshell, I believe ancient Egyptians were in fact a black African people due to, for one, starting off the Bible. The Bible says that the son of Ham is the father of black people. Let's see here. Number two, in terms of linguistics, they speak in Afro-Asiatic languages. Many of them Afro-Asiatic languages are one branch is mainly focused on the Jewish language, or I should say Hebrew, and Arab-speaking Arabic languages, related languages. Also, number three, in terms of the physical variation, ancient Egyptians displayed a great deal of physical variation in terms of hair, hair texture, skin complexion, nose type, face structure, and then also here they had the conspicuous elongated occipital, and this is very similar to the variation you see in other parts of Africa, such as West, Central, South Africa, and East Africa especially. Also here you see the similarity, the number three, which is the reports from the different philosophers in Greece, and many of them state that they had full lips and dark skin complexion, woolly hair, and that's of course similar to that of other black African people. And then number four, ancient Egyptians basically, I believe that's three or four. Depictions. Well, okay. In terms of ancient Egyptian artwork here, their physical features very similar to other African people, but you understand it. I hope you guys understand it. But yeah, basically, ancient Egyptians in a nutshell here are very similar in terms of every aspect, in terms of other black African people. So with that being said, please guys comment on what you think about the ancient Egyptian origins. Do you believe ancient Egyptians were Caucasian, Mediterranean Caucasian people? Do you think they are more similar to black African peoples, and you support what I'm stating? If so, please contact me through messaging or comments. Just let me know what you think, guys. Okay, peace.